Night my mother-in-law, Diana Hartwell, threw a black trash bag at my feet and told me to scrape together whatever cheap memories I had and disappear before sunrise, the rain in Greenwich. Connecticut was coming down so hard I could barely see the marble steps of the mansion I had called home for 7 years. She stood at the top of those stairs in her ivory silk robe, holding a glass of red wine like a queen passing sentence. And her husband Richard, my late husband's father, stood behind her with that same cruel smirk he used to wear at charity galas when he pretended to know me. But tonight there was no audience. No cameras, no pretending, just a widow of 28 being evicted from the only home she had left. And as I bent down to pick up that black bag in the freezing rain, Diana leaned over the railing and said the words that would change my entire life. "Sweetheart, the Hartwells were never your family. You were just a phase Daniel went through before he died." I did not cry. I did not beg. I looked up at her, water dripping off my chin, and I smiled, a small, quiet smile. Because in that exact moment, I made a promise to myself that one day I would come back to those marble steps not as a guest, not as a daughter-in-law, but as the legal owner of every single brick of the Hartwell estate. And I would do it without screaming, without lawsuits on the front page, and without ever raising my voice. My name is Emily. I'm 28 years old. I lost my husband Daniel to a sudden heart attack 2 years ago. And the story you are about to hear is the story of how a quiet woman with nothing but a duffel bag, a community college accounting degree, and a folder full of documents Daniel had hidden in our closet, took down one of the oldest old money families in Connecticut in exactly 94 days. So before you scroll away, I want you to do me one favor. Comment the word justice below if you have ever been underestimated by people who thought their money made them untouchable. Because by the end of this video, you are going to understand why the most dangerous person in any room is the woman everyone forgot to be afraid of. I checked into a tiny motel off Route 1 that first night, sat on the edge of a stained mattress, and opened the leather folder Daniel had given me 8 months before he died. Inside were 3 things. The original deed to the Hartwell mansion, which his grandfather had transferred into a trust Daniel was the sole beneficiary of, not his parents. A confidential audit of Hartwell and Crane Capital, the family's investment firm, showing $22 million of missing client money, and a handwritten letter from Daniel that said, if anything ever happens to me, do not fight them with anger, fight them with paper, because paper is the only language people like my parents respect. I read that letter 11 times that night, and by morning I had a plan, but I needed 3 things I did not yet have. A lawyer who did not belong to my in-laws' country club, a forensic accountant who could not be bought, and patience, because in the world of old money, revenge served hot is called a tantrum, but revenge served slowly is called a strategy. So for the next 30 days, I worked 2 jobs, one waitressing at a diner in Stamford, and one doing bookkeeping at a small law firm in New Haven. And it was at that law firm that I met Marcus Vance, a sharp-eyed estate attorney in his late 40s, who had once been quietly humiliated by Richard Hartwell at a deposition years ago. And when I slid Daniel's folder across his desk and told him my story, Marcus closed his office door, poured 2 cups of black coffee, and said the 7 words I will never forget. "Mrs. Hartwell, we are going to bury them." Over the next 60 days, Marcus and I moved like ghosts. We filed the original trust documents with the Greenwich Probate Court. We formally challenged Diana and Richard's fraudulent transfer of the mansion into their personal names, and at the same time, my forensic accountant, Priya Shah, a brilliant woman who had been blacklisted by Hartwell and Crane for refusing to sign off on falsified reports, quietly compiled the evidence of the $22 million Richard had been skimming from elderly clients to fund Diana's lifestyle. And just when I thought we were ready to strike, I got a phone call that almost shattered me. Diana had filed a defamation lawsuit against me for harassment and was demanding $2 million, claiming I was a grieving, unstable widow stalking the family. And within hours, her PR team had planted 3 articles in Connecticut Society magazines, painting me as a gold digger who had trapped poor Daniel before he died. That was the moment I almost gave up, sitting in my motel room reading those articles. And if you are watching this right now and you have ever felt like the world was laughing at you while you were trying to do the right thing, I need you to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what happened next is the part of my story that I want every woman in the world to hear. I did not respond to the articles. I did not give interviews. I did not even tell my own mother what was happening. Instead, I walked into Marcus's office the next morning and said 3 words: accelerate the timeline. On day 81, we served Diana and Richard with a probate court ruling that officially restored the Hartwell mansion to Daniel's trust, of which I was now the sole legal beneficiary as his widow, on day 83. The SEC opened a formal investigation into Hartwell and Crane Capital based on Priya's evidence. On day 86, 4 of the firm's biggest clients pulled out a combined $90 million. On day 89, Richard's name was leaked to the Wall Street Journal as the subject of a federal probe. And on day 92, Diana's defamation lawsuit was dismissed with prejudice, and she was ordered to pay my legal fees. But I want to be clear about something. I never leaked a single story. I never made a single phone call to a journalist. I simply filed the truth in the right courtrooms and let the system that Diana and Richard had used to protect themselves for 40 years finally turn against them. On day 94, exactly the day I had promised myself, I drove back to Greenwich in a quiet black sedan, wearing the same simple gray coat I had worn the night they threw me out. And I walked up those marble steps not as a widow, not as a victim, but as the legal owner of the entire estate. And when Diana opened the door, her face, that face that had laughed at me in the rain, went completely white. Because standing behind me were Marcus Vance, 2 sheriff's deputies and a moving company, and I handed her the same black trash bag she had thrown at my feet 94 days earlier, and I said the only sentence I had rehearsed. Diana, you have until sunrise to scrape together whatever cheap memories you have and disappear. Richard came running down the stairs in his bathrobe shouting about lawyers, but Marcus simply handed him the court order, the SEC notice, and the eviction paperwork all in one neat folder. And as I walked through the foyer of the house I had been thrown out of, I stopped in front of the giant oil painting of the Hartwell family, Diana, Richard, Daniel, and an empty space where I had been deliberately painted out years ago. And I quietly took it off the wall, turned it around to face the corner, and walked into what had once been my bedroom. I sold Hartwell and Crane Capital's remaining assets 6 months later, used the proceeds to start a foundation in Daniel's name that provides free legal aid to widows being defrauded by their in-laws. And today, 2 years after that rainy night in Greenwich, that foundation has helped over 400 women reclaim what was legally theirs. Diana now lives in a small rental apartment in Hartford. Richard is awaiting trial, and the Hartwell Mansion is no longer called the Hartwell Mansion, because I had it legally renamed the Daniel Hartwell House, and it operates as a transitional shelter for women escaping financially abusive marriages. So if you are sitting there tonight feeling small, feeling invisible, feeling like the people with money and power have already decided your worth, I want you to remember the words my husband Daniel wrote in that letter. Fight them with paper, because paper is the only language they respect. And I want you to remember that the quietest woman in the room is almost always the most dangerous. So do me one last favor, hit that like button, comment the name of someone who needs to hear this story tonight, and subscribe so the next time a woman is thrown into the rain with nothing but a trash bag, she knows exactly what to do. Because dignity is not something they can take from you. It is something you decide to take back, brick by brick, page by page, day by day, until the marble steps that once humiliated you are the same steps you finally own.